This is part 2 of the Passionflower from the book of the Manchester School of Embroidery. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the stamen. Now, it's very important to realize that the measurements given on the pattern are for a flower made with 80 thread, so very, very fine thread. If you're making a flower with a different type of thread, you're going to need to make the stamen much longer. So what I suggest you do is that you make a chain or take a piece of cord and see how it looks and use that as a measurement. So here I'm again at the pattern, and again it's a pattern where they don't exactly tell you how many stitches you're going to make. It just tells you how long it needs to be. So it says, on a cord of 4 strands of padding thread, work close double stitch for 3 inches. Turn, leave the cord, and then you start on the end bit of the stamen, and it tells you to work for 1.5 inch. So it's important. So you measure 3 inches to do this, but if you're making one, as I said, with a thicker thread, you're going to have a much longer stamen. I've made one in advance because what I tend to do is make one and then I make the other based on the measurement of the first, because when you're crocheting over cord, you can slip the stitches over the thread and it might end up slightly longer or slightly shorter than what you intended it to be. So I'm going to start to make the stamen, and I'm going to measure it on this, and I'll show you with a tape measure as well. I'm using number 80 thread, and I'm using number 20 as a padding cord. Normally I'd use number 10, but as I explained in my previous video, the cotton I got, which was number 10, hadn't been mercerized and was a little bit too fluffy and soft. I'm also using a 0.6mm hook. So the first thing I'll do is prepare the padding thread. I don't need too much. So I'll start by placing my crochet hook in the loop of the thread, and now I'm going to make single crochet all along the length of the cord. Somebody commented on the fact that I should use only the terms used in the book, but as I explained, I have subscribers from all over the world, and I find it easier to explain the terms because some people would say double crochet and some people would say single crochet. So in the book it says double crochet, but a lot of people would use single crochet for this stitch. So as you can see, my stitches are slightly bunched up a bit, so I can slide them along the cord to smooth it out and to make them slightly more even. So another about ½ inch to go. So here we have the 3 inches. I'm going to measure it on the inner side of the stamen because that's the row we're making. And I'll curl it. And as you can see, this is slightly longer. So I'll move the stitches closer together. If they're slightly different size, it doesn't really matter, but if you want them to be even, then it is important. So here we are. It's more or less the same. If you're making your flower with a different thread, what I would do is measure like this and then judge and see how far you want it to come and if it's big enough. And I would work that way rather than the 3 inches because that's not going to work with number 10 thread. So for the next row, it says turn and leave the cord. And then it says work 1 double and then treble stitch for 1.5 inches. So again, you're not being told how many stitches you need. And by treble, they would mean what most people would call a double crochet. So thread over the hook into the stitch, pull the thread through once, pull the thread through twice, and finish the stitch. So you need to do this for 1.5 inches on with this thread, but then again, if you're using a different thread, 1.5 inches would be half of 3 inches. So divide the stamen into 2 and see how far you need to go. What you can do with these patterns, because you're not being told exactly how many stitches you need and so on, you can actually adapt them and use them as a basis for your own design. Make sure your work lies flat. And again, I'm going to measure. to get an idea of how far I've come. So just a few more stitches and it'll be as long as the first one. So here we are, and I can start on the next row. So after we've worked the 1.5 inches, it says make 2 double, which means a single crochet. So hook through, pull the thread through, and pull the thread through the stitches, the 2 stitches. And then make a single, which is a slip stitch. So make a slip stitch, and that's the end of that row. Turn, and it says make another single, so a slip stitch, free double. So again, most people would call that single crochet. Then a treble, which is again a double. Chain 2, miss 1, and then make another double in the next stitch. Now it says that so you're going to repeat that right up to the end, but it says that you can, if the work becomes too full, so if you find that it's bunching up, you can skip a few more stitches. So you don't take it as a rule. You judge yourself as on how the work lies, on whether you skip you do it every other stitch or not. So you look here, and the work's lying flat, so I can continue just skipping 1 stitch. So here I'm finding it's bunching a little bit, so I'll be skipping 2 stitches instead of just the 1. 1, 2, and I'll get into the 3rd. You do that because this is going to form a curve. So that's why you need to judge whether you're going to skip a stitch or not. So where it curves more, you're going to need more doubles, and where it curves less, you're going to need less. I'm approaching the end here. Then it says to go to 3 stitches from the end, so that's 1, 2, 3. So I'm there more or less. And it says work 2 double and 1 single, so I've got room for 1 more stitch, and then 2 single crochet, and a slip stitch. For the next row it says turn, make 3 double. I will skip the slip stitch and work in the next one. And it says make 3 treble into each 2 chain to the end of the set. So again, by so I've reached the end of the previous row where there was chains, and now they want you to make single crochet all along the edge right up to the beginning. So I'm at the end of the row there, so we finish off. And the stem starting to take shape. So I'm going to reattach my thread to where we left the cord. And they now want you to do a single crochet all along the edge up to the end over the cord. Crochet in the end thread as well. So here's the end. And now we stretch it so it can lie flat. It could be that you have to tighten it, so you can just pull on the cord and redistribute the stitches. So there we go. So this is the first one I made. And that's not too bad, it's more or less the same size. So here's a flower, and I'm going to show you how to assemble it. So the first thing you're going to do is determine which one's the front and which is the back. So this is the back and this is the front. I'm going to use my the end of my thread, to secure the cord. So what I do is I bend over the cord, and then I put a few firm stitches in. Just secure the cord. And then I can cut the end of the cord. And you'll find that that is enough. That secures it. So I do the same now with the stamens. So again, round the base of where the cord is, I'm just going to put a few firm stitches. I'm going to incorporate all the other bits of thread as well. You can also bend it over slightly, but because this is going to be behind the flower, it's not so important. So I make a bit of a knot. There we go. I'm hanging on to this thread because I'm going to use this to sew the stamen onto the flower. I'm going to cut this off. Oh, I cut the thread off. I'll just use a new one. So again, I carefully check which is the front and the back of the flower, and the stamen needs to be pointing outwards. I pass the stamen over the bottom ring and then under the flower, and then I secure it. You decide yourself where it's going to go. You can have them close together or further a little apart, and then secure it to the ring with a few stitches. Seem to be all thumb. Just a few stitches underneath, and then I run my needle along the stem and I put a few stitches on the ring to secure the next bit of the stem to the flower. It doesn't need much, because when you're going to be crocheting the ground of your work, it'll help secure the two pieces together. So there's one. And then we do the same again with the second to keep it in place. In my experience, it's never come loose. It's never unraveled itself. So that stamen pointed that way, so this one's going to have to point the other way. So again, I'm going to run the needle just along the stem and then secure it into the ring. Do it just a few stitches. And there we have it. So what I do then is I'll pin it on my board and give it a nice shape. And the advantage you have with this motif is you can move these stamens and you can arrange them so you could do this or you could do this according to what you want to do. So when you sew it onto the backing cloth, you can decide yourself where you want to have it. So there we have the passion flower, and it's a really nice motif. I've used it in several other projects, but I often make adaptations to it. I'll often just use that as a model and then do something different with it. So here's my lampshade where I used it. This lampshade's nearly finished. I'll be finishing it off this weekend. And as you can see, I made tendrils out of just simple single crochet overcord to go with them. And here's another one. This is one on the edge of a sleeve that I'm working on. So I adapted the stitch, and instead of having the tendrils, the stamens, I used beads. So this is beading and also crochet loops. So it's a very versatile motif, and once you get the hang of it, you can start designing for yourself.